Hi.
Hola.
Hi, hier ist Mr. Döse.
This is Michael Bradley.
Hey, I'm Memphis.
Hey.
Hola. Hello.
I'm here with soccer.com.
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 And I'm talking with my friends soccer.com.
See you soon.
Hey guys, Josh from soccerreviewsforyou.com, bringing you my first impressions plus on-feet video of the brand new New Balance Visaro 2.0 Pro. So this is the latest variation of the New Balance Visaro, which is a pretty major design change coming from the original Visaro, a shoe that I actually thought was pretty good. This time around, what they've done is they've changed the entire upper, they've tweaked the sole plate and stud pattern, and they've included a foam midsole, something that is fairly unusual for a soccer shoe, but we're going to be highlighting all of those things in today's video. So if you are interested in learning more about the very unique Visaro 2.0 Pro, stick around, watch the entire video. If you're interested in a pair of these for yourself, I'll leave a little pop-up on screen, or you can click the first link down below in the description. That'll take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find Buy It Now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes, where you'll be able to pick these up below their normal $200 retail price. Now, included inside the box with the shoes themselves, they do give you a string bag, which is a nice little extra, kind of expected with top-end models for most of the big brands, and obviously New Balance is kind of following suit. Now, with the actual tech specs and performance aspects of the shoe, the upper is entirely different coming from the original Visaro. Yes, the first Visaro did have somewhat of a foam-based material, which had kind of a honeycomb pattern. It reminded a lot of people of the Nike Skin upper found on the original Phantom 1, but with a much stiffer feel overall. On the Visaro 2, they've incorporated a molded foam upper, but it's much thinner, but also has padded sections to it. So kind of like what we've seen from the Evo Power line. Obviously we see some foam inserts in the new Phantom 3 as well. We're getting something along those lines with this new Visaro Pro. So you can see that within the actual upper itself, you're gonna find this hexagon shape. Some of them are raised off the shoe, some of them are indented in the shoe. So you have embossed and debossed sections. The parts that are embossed are actually your thinner areas of the upper that aren't really gonna provide any extra padding, where the parts that are debossed, where you can see they're raised off the upper, you have it right here along the end logo, and then kind of in the passing zone of the shoe, that actually does have more of a softer foam cushion to it. So you do have a variance in thickness and padding on certain parts of the upper where you have the embossed and debossed sections. Now the upper itself and the general material, it does have a firmer sensation to it out of the box. So it's one of those materials that's fairly difficult to judge just from brand new. Gonna have to get a lot more time in these to really understand how this is gonna feel. But the shoe overall feels much stiffer out of the box than I was honestly expecting, and definitely stiffer than what we got from the original Visaro from brand new. That's not to say that this is a bad shoe or a bad upper, but it does, like I said, feel pretty much completely different in comparison to the original molded foam upper that we got on the original Visaro. So definitely some major changes here. You can see that they did change the actual lacing system on the shoe as well. It's no longer slightly off-centered. It's now directly down the middle, which I definitely don't think is a bad thing at all. It's got a nice deep lacing system as well, so you're able to get a nice snug fit when you actually tie the laces tight. The tongue itself does feature pretty much the same material as the rest of the upper, so you're getting a similar kind of thinner overall sensation across the entire foot, which is definitely nice. The upper itself is almost one piece entirely. The only seam you're gonna find is right here on the medial side, kind of, I guess, at the 2/3 mark of the shoe, closer towards the back. And it is, of course, a fused over stitch line, kind of like we're seeing from a lot of brands at the moment. We've seen this from Puma, we see it from Adidas, obviously, and they've hidden the seam pretty well. You don't really feel it when you're actually wearing the shoes. And also, speaking of the lacing system, they did incorporate an extra lace hole. So you can see at the top, there's 2 lace holes positioned very closely to each other. It's nice that they do give you the option for the extra lace hole, although based on just trying these on and walking around a little bit, I found that you really do have to use that extra lace hole in order to get the proper fit and lockdown in the heel area. If you only use the first one, I find that the heel lockdown just isn't good enough. But once you use the second one, like I said, it does seem to hold your foot in place quite nicely. Now, obviously, something that's visually very apparent with this shoe is the fact that it is low cut. You would think that perhaps New Balance would kind of jump on the trend of making something that is cut slightly above the ankle, but they opted for something low cut, which I definitely do approve of. I like low cut shoes. I don't think that it's an obsolete way of building a soccer cleat at all. So you can see you do have a standard low cut, and it's got this interesting kind of stitch trim line along the edge. Looks pretty good, has a nice premium vibe to it. I would definitely say that about the shoe, is that I like that they designed everything specific to this particular model. It doesn't feel like they've copied anybody. It doesn't feel like they've just kind of taken elements from previous models or other shoes within the brand and kind of just I guess recycled it. This feels like everything was purpose-built and purposely designed, which is definitely a good thing. But internally is kind of where things get a little bit more interesting with this particular shoe, and this also has to do with the midsole. And you can see from the outside, the shoe has, I guess the best way to describe it is somewhat of a chunky look. It almost seems like it's too tall, and that has to do with the look of the midsole, not necessarily the feel of the shoe. It almost has the appearance of a baseball cleat, I guess is the best way to put it. In terms of what it looks like to me, of course, everyone can have their own opinion, but that midsole line, which you can see here running through, it's a little bit difficult to kind of pick up on this particular model because they made it orange along with the same color of the sole plate. But you can see the foam top line there, and that is basically what's acting as your insole. Inside the shoe, there really isn't an insole. You just have the foam layer, and then they put the same lining material in the heel, covering up the bottom of the foot, acting as kind of an insole liner, if you will. And the type of foam that they used is called fresh foam. It's the same material we saw on the insole of the original Visaro. It's something they use in a lot of their running and training models. New Balance obviously being predominantly a running brand. They're not quite as established in the soccer cleat world, but it does provide some pretty effective underfoot cushioning. Now, does this feel like you're running in a pair of running shoes? No, not necessarily. It still does have a fairly low profile sensation in terms of the amount of cushion that you get underfoot. I guess the best way to describe it is that it still feels like a soccer cleat, and that you can tell there's a hard plastic sole plate underneath your feet, but there is a decent amount of underfoot cushioning that I would say is above average for what you can expect in most soccer cleats. So again, nothing groundbreaking in terms of how it feels out of the box, but until I get more time to actually run around in these things, it's really difficult to judge that kind of thing just based on an initial try on. As far as the actual heel liner is concerned, you can see it is made from this really interesting kind of very fine mesh material. It does have the two little heel bumps on either side, or I guess ankle bumps, to keep your heel locked in place. The very back of the heel though is pretty much completely firm. There's really no extra padding aside from what that thin mesh liner is going to provide. It does have an internal plastic heel counter, so there's not a lot of extra padding in the liner, which means that they're really relying on the shape of the shoe to just fit you quite nicely when you pull the laces tight and lock everything in place. It's not necessarily a negative thing that they didn't include a lot of padding back there, but again, it really depends on how this fits you specifically as to whether or not that's going to work 100% in terms of giving you a nice, comfortable, locked-in sensation. When you add a little bit of padding, it gives you a little bit of leeway. So this is kind of an interesting way of doing things that, again, I'm very curious to try out. The actual base of the sole, where I guess the insole would normally be, the bottom of the shoe, does have that same kind of hexagon texturing to it as well that you find across the upper. So not something you really notice when you're actually wearing the shoes, but something that they did implement as somewhat of a kind of unique feature inside the shoe at the bottom of your foot. Again, it doesn't necessarily have that running shoe feel in terms of underfoot cushioning, but it does feel like you're getting more underfoot cushioning than what the average soccer shoe would provide with a thin foam insole. As far as the sole plate is concerned, the sole plate is a little bit stiffer than what we got from the original Visaro. It's got a decent thickness to it, but that also has to do with your kind of including the midsole that's kind of within the sole plate itself. And again, I think it looks a little bit deceptive that the sole plate is kind of tall. You actually have this foam lip kind of going over the edge ever so slightly. So you're not necessarily sitting directly on top of this. You're sitting kind of in it, if that makes any sense at all. So this is almost kind of running the edge of your foot as opposed to being underneath your foot, if that makes any sense at all. So you get a sensation of almost sitting inside the sole plate to a certain extent. I don't want to really compare this to the Nike plate sole plate on the Mercurials because it's not that at all, but you do, like I said, have that sensation of sitting inside of the base of the shoe versus directly on top of a flat sole plate, which is kind of an interesting thing, but it does feel a little bit strange. It has a very unique sensation on feet, which we'll get to more about in just a second. So you have a decent amount of stiffness to it, but it's not stiff to the point where it doesn't feel like it will break in over time. So again, sole plate and upper does have a firmer sensation out of the box. And as far as the stud pattern is concerned, it's more or less the same layout as what we got from the actual first Visaro, but they've changed the length of the studs. They've made them a little bit longer. and the positioning is ever so slightly tweaked. So you can see what's kind of interesting here is that these studs are slightly offset, so you don't have quite exactly a square setup there. They're just not at the same, they don't really mirror each other on both sides. You can see they did include the big toe pick stud still, but they did make it a lot smaller than what we got from the original Visaro as well, which I know a lot of people just didn't like having that bigger stud closer to the tip of the toe. But the general layout and shape of the studs, pretty much the same. They have a triangular shape, so I guess to a certain extent, it is kind of reminiscent of what we've seen from Adidas in the past, but you do have more studs under feet. And if it is anything like the original Visaro, traction should be pretty good. It's a decent layout, nothing too crazy as far as the actual design is concerned, so I do expect it to work fairly well on firm natural grass. As far as weight is concerned, the shoe itself weighs in at 8.9 ounces in a size 9.5 US. So in regards to weight, for what I would describe as a thinner synthetic shoe, it definitely doesn't have an overly lightweight feel. It is about an ounce more than what we got from the original Visaro. Is that a good or bad thing? It's really a matter of personal preference. I don't really find these to be heavy on my feet at all, but if you do like a lighter feel to your shoes, these aren't necessarily going to provide that, at least in comparison to other thin synthetic shoes that are currently on offer. So the only other thing to talk about here is in regards to the look of the shoe. And obviously that's going to be controversial with any brand that isn't Nike, Adidas, or Puma. They have a harder time kind of establishing, I guess, a fan base in regards to how their shoe looks. And the New Balance Visaro 2.0 is definitely an interesting looking shoe, especially with this particular colorway. You can see that the front half of the shoe is what I would describe as almost like a slate green color, has a slightly bluish tinge to it as well, and then it transitions into a very bright orange. You have the New Balance logo right there, the N in white on the lateral side, and then a different New Balance logo in white on the medial side. The hexagon pattern kind of fades the orange into the green, which is kind of an interesting idea. You get the orange laces, the entire liner is orange as well, and then the sole plate, as you guys can see, is a combination of white and orange. So overall, I don't think that it's a bad looking shoe. The shape does look interesting in comparison to a lot of soccer cleats. That would be my one criticism in regards to the aesthetics, but that has to do with the Proform Last, which we'll talk about in just a second. But nonetheless, I don't think it looks horrible, but I also don't think it looks quite as good as what we got from the original Visaro. But again, let me know what you guys think of the aesthetics of this shoe down below in the comments. But that's enough about tech specs. Let's take a look at how these things fit and feel on feet. So you can see here on the right shoe, I actually threw in some white reflective wide SR4U replacement laces. If you're interested in a pair of replacement laces for yourself, the website to go to is www.sr4ulaces.com. There'll be a little pop-up on screen, as well as a link down below in the description. So if you're interested in a pair, be sure to go ahead and check that out. So when you tie these up, you'll immediately notice that, again, the upper does have a fairly stiff feel out of the box, and immediately because of this design, the sides of the shoe really want to flare out, especially if you don't use that second lace hole. So I really find that it is important to use that second lace hole just to prevent that from flaring out so much, and to also keep your heel locked in place effectively. So I'll just tie these up really quickly, and I'll put both shoes on just so we can see what it looks like and talk about the feel a little bit more. Again, I do like the fact that the lacing system is now down the middle and runs a little bit deeper than the original Visaro. I just find that to be more effective in terms of getting a better fit overall. When you can adjust more of the shoe, it allows you to kind of make the shoe fit your foot as close as it possibly can, because obviously they're not custom made. Everyone's got a slightly different shaped foot, and they can't make a shoe that fits everyone perfectly. So having a slightly deeper lacing system definitely can help with that. The one thing that I do immediately notice about this shoe, though, is that it has a fairly deep fit in regards to volume. So that's something that, again, is not for everybody. And I would say that the one thing that kind of surprised me about this shoe the most is the way that it fits in general. So I'll just tie these up really quickly here, and we'll take a look at both shoes on feet. Now again, when you guys saw them just in hand, it does have that kind of clunkier, almost bulky look to it, and it does have that feel to a certain extent on feet. I really noticed that the upper has this a high volume fit to it, especially in the forefoot and toe box area, where I feel like there's just a lot of extra material where my feet are floating around on the inside. Now obviously this is for my foot. If you do have kind of a higher volume, thicker foot, you might not necessarily have this issue, but for me, I don't necessarily have super thin feet. I would say they're pretty average in regards to width and general volume, and to me I just feel like there's a little bit too much volume in the forefoot and toe box area. The shoe also has that Proform Last kind of like what we got from the original Visaro, where it has kind of this interesting curve that I guess is a little bit more exaggerated in the forefoot area, and it comes to more of a curve closer towards the big toe as opposed to just being perfectly rounded. So that's a little bit unusual as well. But overall, I don't mind how they fit. The upper does have somewhat of a plasticky, firmer, almost rigid sensation out of the box, but it does feel like it will break in quite nicely. And in regards to heel lockdown, I don't necessarily have any issues with slippage when I tie them properly, but I do feel like there is pressure on my heel, which is a little bit concerning out of the box. But again, they're fairly stiff from brand new. That could change over time. So overall impression out of the box, they feel okay, but they're definitely one of those shoes that is going to require a little bit of break-in time and just some time to get used to them in general. In regards to width, this is the regular width version of the shoe. They do make a wide fit version as well. So if you do have wider feet, the wide fit version is probably the way to go. But being that this is the regular fit version, it does have some decent width to it overall. I wouldn't say that it's a particularly tight fitting shoe, although they definitely do fit snug once you tie the laces tight. But width-wise, I'd say these are going to be suitable for most people. Again, if you do want a wider fit, they do offer a wide fit variation of the shoe. And of course, in regards to sizing, they run about a half size small. In the Visaros, I like to go to a 9.5 US, which is a half size larger than what I would normally wear. And with the Visaro 2, I did exactly the same thing. I went up half a size, and the fit and the length seems to be absolutely perfect. So if you are looking to order a pair of these for yourself, I would strongly recommend going a half size up in order to achieve the best possible fit. So that is pretty much it, guys, for my review of the Visaro 2.0 Pro. Definitely an interesting shoe, definitely a shoe that you can expect to see more content on in the near future on my channel. If you guys, again, are interested in a pair for yourself, you can click the little eye in the corner of the screen or the first link down below in the description. That'll take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find Buy It Now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes, where you'll be able to pick these guys up below their normal $200 retail price. If you have any questions regarding the Visaro 2, leave them down below in the comments, and I definitely will get an answer out to you. If you enjoyed today's video, found it helpful and informative, be sure to support it with a like. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. You can find all of my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. And as always, thanks for watching.